Karl Marx. Okay, you've definitely heard the name, you've probably seen the iconic beard, but what did he actually believe? His ideas are so often buried under just layers and layers of misunderstanding. So in the next few minutes, we're going to unpack the man who thought he had totally cracked the code of human history. So our story starts in a really surprising place, the year 2014. A super dense economics book, Thomas Piketty's Capital in the 21st Century, suddenly becomes a massive bestseller. And its title, that was a very deliberate nod to Marx's most famous work. And it really forced a question that a lot of people thought was totally settled. Why on earth is a 19th century philosopher suddenly so relevant again? So what was it? Why did this really old idea suddenly feel so new, so urgent? Well, the answer is in a simple but really powerful formula that Piketty uncovered, one that seemed to echo Marx's deepest warnings about capitalism. What Piketty's research showed was that wealth from investments, what he calls R, was growing way faster than the overall economy, or G. Now, this isn't just some abstract formula, right? It's basically a feedback loop for spiraling inequality, and he argued it could threaten the very foundations of democracy itself. All of a sudden, the ghost of Marx, who so many people thought was buried for good with the Berlin Wall, was back. And to really understand Marx's ghost, we have to go back. We have to understand the world that created him, an era of just explosive, chaotic change. I mean, just think about the world Marx was born into. You've got these democratic revolutions in America and France promising freedom and equality for all. And at the exact same time, the Industrial Revolution is just completely rewriting the rules of daily life with steam and steel and these huge, sprawling factories. And this was the central contradiction of the age. On one hand, society was talking about these incredibly lofty ideals of liberty and equality. But on the other hand, it was creating this brand new reality of just brutal exploitation inside these dark, noisy factories and mills. The whole world just seemed to be spinning completely out of control. And right into this whirlwind steps a German thinker who believed he had found not just, an explanation, but a scientific answer to the riddles of history itself. See, Marx didn't see himself as just another philosopher. Oh no, he believed he was a scientist and that he was uncovering the fundamental laws that govern human society. Before Marx, his teacher, Hegel, argued that history was this grand clash of ideas, sort of a battle up in the clouds. Well, Marx dragged that idea right down to earth. He completely flipped it. He argued, no, it's not about ideas, it's about things. The real story of humanity, he said, is the struggle over who controls the material stuff we need to survive. And he called this whole theory historical materialism. The easiest way to think about it is like a building. The economic system, how we produce and distribute things, that's the foundation, the base. Everything else, our laws, our politics, our art, even our beliefs, that's all the superstructure that gets built on top. So to really understand a society, Marx said you have to look at its economic foundation first. For Marx, this meant history wasn't just a series of random events, not at all. It was a predictable force of nature, almost like a tornado, driven by this constant cyclical struggle between social classes. It was like a spinning wheel, where each system eventually collapses under the weight of its own problems, just to make way for the next one. And the human cost of this new industrial system was this profound feeling he called alienation. Think about it. Before, a craftsman had an identity that was tied to their work. You were a shoemaker or a blacksmith. Your labor was a part of you. But in a factory, you're just a cog in a giant machine, doing one repetitive task over and over, completely disconnected from the final thing you spend your entire life helping to create. So, armed with this science of history, Marx looked at the capitalist system all around him and made one of the boldest, most dramatic predictions in modern history. This is probably his most famous prediction. He argued that the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, the owners of the factories and the capital, were, without even knowing it, creating the very force that would destroy them. A massive, unified working class that had absolutely nothing left to lose. And he saw it as this inevitable 5-step process. First, capitalism's own flaws would create more and more crises and inequality. Second, the working class, the proletariat, would just get bigger and more concentrated. Third, this would eventually lead to a revolution. Fourth, the workers would seize the factories and the land. And finally, step 5, a new society, communism, would emerge, ending that cycle of class struggle for good.
I mean, it was a powerful, scientific-sounding prophecy. There was just one little problem. History didn't quite follow the script.
Based on his own theory, Marx was totally certain that the breaking point would come in the most industrialized nation on Earth at the time, England, right? It was the epicenter of capitalism, so logically, it had to be the first to collapse. But instead, the revolution ignited decades after he died, and in a place that looked more like Europe's past than its future. Russia was this largely feudal, agricultural society, the exact opposite of what his theory predicted should happen. And what followed was just a tragic distortion of his ideas. Marx envisioned workers taking control. Instead, a single political party seized all the power. He predicted the state would eventually wither away. Instead, it became all-powerful and totally oppressive. The result wasn't liberation. It was authoritarianism, violence, and misery.
And this is the paradox that's right at the heart of his legacy. A philosophy that was designed to break the economic chains of oppression became the justification for forging new, and in many cases, even more brutal political chains.
And this leaves us with a central, haunting question that historians and thinkers are still debating today. How did a theory that was born from a desire for human freedom end up linked to some of the most oppressive regimes in history? What went wrong?